Hey guys, is it on? Are we on? Okay. See you people. Welcome. People joining in. As you're coming in, I encourage you guys to please turn on your cameras. It'll be awesome to see your lovely faces this morning. Good morning, all. Welcome, welcome to Young Leaders Lab. We've got people representing from all over the country. That's fantastic. We've got people here from Liverpool and Newcastle and Kent. It's good to see Alex here. Just give it a few more moments as people are joining in. While you're waiting, why don't you drop in the location that you're representing this morning? It's great to see you all. Good morning again. My name is Helder. I'm on our YXYA team out in Guildford, Surrey, and it's so good to join us today in this Psychology of Young People breakout of Young Leaders Lab. As we're waiting for people to join in, why don't you write in the chat the location, where you're from. It'll be great to see you. And as I mentioned earlier as well, why don't you go ahead and turn on your cameras as well. It'll be brilliant to see you this morning. Got a few people joining in. It's good to see Follow here. Hey, Follow. Yeah, people are joining in. Oh, look at that. We got people from Greenwich, London, Newcastle. Wow, Paris. Blessing. Welcome. It's good to have you all the way from Paris. We've got Paula from Lancaster. We've got Paul from Worcestershire. Wow, we got Denny from Romania. And Helen all the way from Elephant and Castle. It's brilliant to see people from all over the world representing here on this breakout today. Well, good morning. As people are joining in, we'll get started. I don't think any time here today. A massive, massive good morning to you all. Thank you for being on this breakout session of Young Leaders. The breakout session is the psychology of young people. We have none other than Ana Loback, who's an executive coach, a psychologist, and currently a doctoral researcher in psychology and behavioral science, and who, by the way, led the most incredible session last night on cancel culture with Dan Watson. If you missed that conversation, please, I encourage you to head over to our YouTube channel and check out that conversation. They went through all sorts of things, from the effects of cancel culture on society and the effects of cancel culture on the person doing the cancelling and on the person getting cancelled. So I encourage you to head over to our YouTube channel and check out that conversation. We'll get started. We've got Ana here with us. Ana, you here?
Yes, I am. Yes. How's it going?
Going well. It's good to see all these people joining in. And by the way, this session is going to be a two-part session. Ana is going to be the first half an hour, and then for the last 20 minutes, we've got a bit of Q&A as well. I encourage you guys, as Ana is sharing and talking an incredible keynote presentation she's got set up for us, please write in the chat any questions, and I'm going to be going through and asking Ana the questions that you have. No doubt, I know you guys are going to have questions on today's session. So yeah, Ana, you ready to get started?
I think so. I am. Yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's so lovely to see all of you. Maybe just, yay, ready. Hi, Pete Cleveland. Wow, it's so good to see people's faces as well. This is awesome. Right, so just a quick suggestion, just so we don't get the ping every time someone enters the waiting room. Maybe we can disable the waiting room and just let everyone in. Otherwise, it's going to be interesting. Anyway, let's get straight into it. So like Elder said, we have half an hour where I just want to share a few stats with you, a few thoughts, a few ideas in terms of what's currently happening with young people, particularly in the current context. And then I'm really happy to take your questions. Now, I get very easily distracted, so this ping is going to distract me. I do apologize in advance for that because it is, there you go, ping again. So please bear with me. And I also get very distracted with questions, which is a good thing. But, I don't mind. Keep your questions coming, and then hopefully Hilda will help gather all the questions, and we'll take some time at the end. And obviously, even after today, because we only have an hour, if you continue with questions and stuff, you can contact me. You can find me on Instagram or LinkedIn, obviously under my name. And I really look forward to continuing this discussion with you. I think I'd like to start by saying that there are a few key facts that I think are important for us to be aware of. And these facts, the source is the World Health Organization, and these stats are pretty recent. First of all, 1 in 6 people around the world are aged between 10 and 19 years old. There's a lot of young people out there. What we also know from the World Health Organization is that mental health conditions account currently for 16% of the global burden of disease and injury in young people. And from this, half of all mental health conditions actually start around the age of 14. But what we also know is that these numbers are probably much higher because most cases are undetected, unreported, and therefore, unfortunately, most cases tend to be untreated as well. Now, we know that globally, depression is one of the leading causes of illness and disability among adolescents. We also know at the moment suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death in 15 to 19-year-olds. And these numbers are worrying, but like I said, it's likely that the numbers, the stats that we have aren't even the full reality. It's likely that the numbers are much higher because most things are unreported still. So the consequences of not addressing adolescent and young people's mental health conditions are key. They will extend to adulthood. They will impair both physical and mental health, and end up limiting opportunities for young people to then lead fulfilling lives as adults. So it's really a priority, and I guess all of you, I'm preaching to the choir here, obviously all of you joined this session because you're all interested in this stuff and all interested in knowing what we can do to prepare ourselves as a community, and also for young people joining the session, I'm sure you want to know what you can do to develop good mental health and well-being. But we can't talk about this stuff without briefly addressing the impact of COVID-19. We now know, I've been part of some great research projects around studying some of the things that link to the impact of COVID-19. And actually, it's taken a huge toll psychologically on people of all ages, as we know. But we know that the group most affected is actually young people. And again, sources there, so you can look for more data if you want to, but this is data from the Mental Health Foundation. One of the key effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on adolescent mental health has been the lockdown. The impact of social deprivation, particularly on adolescent development, when it comes to people, young people being deprived of things that were a major source of mental health and well-being, which are the kind of the social groups, that has taken a huge toll, and all the evidence is now pointing to in that direction. We know that there are a number of mental health determinants, particularly for young people, and social connection is one of the most important ones. So we have to consider the impact of this lockdown. And later on, I'll share a few ideas in terms of solutions and things that so these are the things that we need to watch out for, we need to be aware of, and we'll be sharing some ideas in terms of solutions and what things we need to do. But we know that, for example, when I talk about mental health determinants, and we know that this has had a huge impact on young people's mental health and well-being, and we'll talk about the dimensions of that and what do I mean by that. We know that, first of all, adolescence is a crucial period for developing social and emotional habits that will be really important for mental well-being. And this is the time of our lives when, everything that we do repeatedly will become a habit. And what I mean by that is that everything that you do repeatedly will become ingrained in the striatum, which is a part of the brain that sits under all the kind of the neocortex, the more kind of the logical part of your brain. The striatum sits in the oldest, most primitive part of our brains. It's actually the part of our brains that we share with other animals like birds and reptiles, not just mammals. It's called the reptilian brain in some of the kind of the theory around the brain. Paul MacLean has developed this model of the brain where he talks about the reptilian brain. And this is where every single thing that you do repeatedly will become deeply ingrained into that part of the brain, which is the striatum. And the striatum is attached, or has attached to it, what we call the reward centers of the brain, the pleasure centers of the brain. And that means that it is very difficult to stop doing things that become a habit. Why? Because you get rewards every time you do something that is a habit. Your brain experiences pleasure and reward, and therefore it reinforces that habit cycle. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because it's when people are in their adolescence or young people, the habits that you form in that age are really, really, really hard to break, essentially. And don't get me wrong, it's a good thing to have that part of the brain, and to have, we wouldn't be able to function without automatic things. Like I wouldn't be able to get off the chair without it being an automatic thing. So automaticity is really good for human beings. It's great for, staying alive and performing, but it's bad when the habits are bad, isn't it? So this is why it's important for young people in particular to adopt healthy sleep patterns, to take regular exercise, to develop coping skills rather than avoiding problems, actually going through problems and developing coping mechanisms, ways to cope with problems and issues, developing problem-solving skills. You can only develop problem-solving skills when you go through problems. Developing interpersonal skills, which is why lockdown and social deprivation can be so difficult. It's a period of life when we learn how to manage emotions, and it's also crucial to be in supportive environments in our family, at school, etc. And on the COVID-19 piece and the impact on young people's mental health and well-being, we know that there are a few different risk factors for mental health. I would say there are three main risk factors: what we call the biological, the childhood experiences, and the stressful factors, environmental. So the biological, what I mean by that, or genetic, what I mean by that is that some people are just more prone to anxiety, and those people will be having a lot more difficulty right now with the situation with COVID. Some people will naturally be more prone for moving up and down in terms of their emotions. Some people are more prone to addiction, for example. And this is what I mean by biological risk factors. Childhood experiences. We know that any adverse childhood experience that you have primes you for mental health problems in the future. For example, neglect, growing up with abuse, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, growing up in a household with a lot of conflict, or living with parents with substance abuse issues, or growing up in extreme poverty. These are risk factors for mental health. And we know for a fact that COVID-19 has accelerated some of these effects by, impact with the family context, young people being in the lockdown circumstances and actually being even more exposed to difficult situations in the family. We also know what I meant by the third risk factor, stressful or environmental issues. I'm referring to financial problems or relationship breakups or chronic pain, for example, but also the toll that COVID-19 and this crisis has taken on people's lives. Now, the impact of increased technology, which is there on the screen as the third bullet point, there's, again, because of COVID-19 and people being locked up in their houses, not being able to go out, young people not being able to go out and socialize unless they're out in the rain. At the moment, we can still hang out outdoors, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But that also has accelerated even more the use of social media and technology. And we know that that takes its toll also on young people's mental health. We know for a fact that when media, social media and media in general influences, has a massive influence on how young people see themselves. It accentuates the difference, the disparity between yourself and, the grass being always greener on the other side on social media. Everyone looks amazing, is doing awesome things, blah, blah, blah. And that has a huge impact on young people's mental health and self-esteem. And there's something else I think that is important for all of you guys who work with young people. It's important for us to know the most common mental health disorders today and how they've been impacted, how this situation has been impacted and accentuated by COVID-19. When we talk about, by the way, most common mental health disorders, what I mean by that is these are the disorders that are most prevalent across the world population. And actually, that's why they're considered common. And we're talking about two main diagnostic categories here, the depressive disorders and the anxiety disorders. Now, starting with anxiety disorders, because I get a lot of questions on this, I should say that anxiety is a healthy, normal human emotion. It's necessary for self-preservation, for survival. It's useful for performance. If you're a singer and you're about to go on a stage and perform in front of hundreds or thousands of people, you will feel anxious, and that's normal. If you're about to sit in an important exam, there is anxiety running through your body, and that's a useful thing. But it moves on a continuum, right? And it's when it gets too far up that continuum where it starts to disrupt your normal life and affects your normal functioning. That's what we're talking about when we talk about an anxiety disorder. So it's really useful to understand that. And stress is also different from this. So stress is your body's reaction to a trigger, and it's generally a short-term experience. It's a response to a threat in a given situation, right? And it's your internal reaction to that situation. Anxiety disorders are when that feeling of worry continues even when there's no specific threat present, or in a manner that is completely disproportionate to the actual risk. So an anxiety disorder is a sustained mental state that can be triggered by stress, by COVID-19, by all the worries and concerns about the education and the future and the money and all of that. But it doesn't fade into the distance even once the threat is mediated. So it can become a problem when those feelings of worry last for a long time, they're out of proportion, you start avoiding situations which may cause you to feel anxious, you feel distressed and completely unable to control those feelings, and it becomes difficult to enjoy and live your life in the way that you want to. That's what we refer to. And the most common ones at the moment are social anxiety disorders are becoming very, very prevalent at the moment. And also post-traumatic stress disorder as well. Now, the other group that I talked about was depression, and it's at the moment, the World Health Organization figures point to 300 million people at the global level are estimated to suffer from depression. It's the equivalent to 4.5% of the world's population, and the numbers now are probably higher. Now, again, depression, it's all human emotions move on a continuum. So it's normal to feel sad and to every now and again experience feelings of, being depressed, or a low mood is normal when, in the current circumstances, or when you experience a loss, or, all that kind of stuff. Sadness is a normal human emotion. That's not what I'm talking about when I talk about depression. What we would call clinical depression is a disorder of the brain, and it has some well-defined signs and symptoms that last for a long period of time, and this is what we need to watch out for. Again, they can range from mild to severe, But they would include things like complete loss of pleasure or interest in life, in activities that you once enjoyed. It would include feelings of real worthlessness and just separation from everyone and isolated and removing yourself from other people and from social activities. And they could also include feelings of extreme fatigue, low energy. Sometimes they include physical symptoms like headaches, stomach aches, muscle pain, etc. So these are the things that I'm talking about, not just feeling a low mood, but it's important for us to know that these are the most common issues that are at the moment on the rise and massively impacted by COVID-19. Now, I think we need to talk about mental health and how we as young people, but well, I say we as young people, I'm 43, I think, but you young people, and I was going to say we as, those of us who work with young people and youth leaders, and it's important to think about how we frame mental health. And I personally think that we have to reframe mental health. We know that the way we frame stories has a huge impact on how we see those issues and how we assign responsibility for an issue or a problem. So the way we think about mental health has a powerful influence in how people take care of their mental health, and particularly for young people, how educational services and healthcare services are perceived and talked about and implemented. For example, what do I mean by that? If the term mental health is still perceived as, services for people with mental illness, then the general public, the service providers, the church community, you, me, everyone will only focus on treating mental illness. And that, in my opinion, is a very reduced way of addressing mental health. If, in contrast, mental health is perceived as a positive state of functioning that is crucial, not just important, but crucial for overall health, physical health, emotional health, etc., then that changes things. And everyone then becomes committed to helping everyone develop and maintain mental health, right? So in order to help create healthy environments, healthy schools, healthy families, healthy communities, it's important to consciously reframe mental health as a positive state of functioning, one that is different from mental illness. Now, it's important to remember that, again, we have to keep breaking the stigma. We have to keep having conversations about mental health, especially right now when we know that all of us are struggling. The stats showed that 1 in 4 people in the UK will have at some point experienced difficulties with their mental health. Today, with COVID, with the pandemic, it's a lot more than that. And the truth is, mental health is not a kind of a dichotomy. You're either mentally healthy or you're mentally ill. It's not that simple. Today, we know that our mental health it sits on it's kind of a continuum. The best way to see that is to view mental health is as a continuum. We know that it's not a reality to see it as a dichotomy. It moves on a continuum. And this mental health continuum represents this view of mental health as a dynamic state of functioning. And this is important for us to understand. It's important for us to understand also that people will experience mental health and mental illness in very different ways. But what I think we all need to know is that, first of all, there's a difference between someone experiencing poor mental health and someone having a mental illness. You could have mental health and a diagnosed mental illness at the same time. And I'm talking about, for example, someone may have a chronic mental illness or may live with OCD, for example, or even bipolar disorder, but maintains good mental health with treatment, has satisfying relationships, a job that they like, good social support. So despite the chronic and long-term nature of some mental disorders, with proper treatment and with proper support, people suffering from mental illness can live productive lives and be a vital part of their communities and experience good mental health. So it's important to differentiate between that. It's also important to know that low mental health doesn't always have to mean that we have a mental illness. For example, you could be on that yellow kind of side of the spectrum with the reacting, common and reversible distress. You could be experiencing, sadness, increased worrying, or even procrastination, forgetfulness, whatever. But actually, that doesn't mean that you have a diagnosable mental illness. When you're failing to progress in a bad job, and at the same time you're dealing with a bad relationship and you're struggling with some other aspect of your life, your mental health will suffer. And you will feel miserable, and that's normal. It doesn't mean that you have a mental illness. So these are things that are important for us to understand. And again, higher levels of mental illness can coexist with high levels of mental health, as I said earlier. And I guess the only other thing that I would say here on the mental health continuum is that addressing both mental illness and mental health is key. If you ignore your mental health, and your kind of life satisfaction issues for long enough, you may develop a mental illness such as, an anxiety disorder or a depression disorder. When we are able to address our lives comprehensively, examining both dimensions, and in fact, all of this range of dimensions, and when we ensure that we have multiple sources of well-being, such as diet, exercise, social support, and activities that give us a sense of meaning, that helps us to have more satisfying lives. And that is a kind of a preventive action, if you like. Now, speaking of solutions, and I'm about to finish in a couple of minutes, one thing that I'm really passionate about, and this is, and when I say passionate, I mean it, is mental health literacy. This is why I've spent the last few months, the last years actually, dreaming of this idea of developing a mental health course that could support our church community with the basics of mental health and well-being. And we're now developing a course. We're now working with, we're really pretty much, I was going to say we're almost there. We can see the finish line now in terms of the project of the mental health course that we've been actively working on. And when I say we, I refer to a team. There's a project team of people who are working on this, on the course materials, videos that will support the course materials, design team, etc., etc. So it's a full-on team. And we are putting together a mental health course, which is about this. It's about helping people have practical knowledge. And that's what mental health literacy is. It's just practical knowledge about mental health that can benefit you or people around you in terms of mental health. It's very simple. And actually, there are some clear benefits that most people still don't know. And I think this is absolutely key. I was talking to Professor Tony Jorm yesterday about this in the context of the mental health course that we're putting together for church. And Professor Anthony Jorm is the author of the Mental Health First Aid model. He's the chair of the Mental Health First Aid International board, and just a fantastic human being who has championed mental health literacy for all of his life. And he gave me these 4 benefits of mental health literacy that I just want to point out. First of all, preventative action. If you ask people what they could do to reduce the risk of heart disease, for example, I'm sure most of you would be able to tell me a few things, right? Like diet, exercise, whatever. But if I ask you what you could do with young people in particular, what you could start doing now to prevent those young people from getting anxiety disorders, from developing anxiety disorders or depressive disorders in the future, most people wouldn't know what actions they could take to reduce the risk of mental illness. This is the truth. Most people don't know. Things like social support, healthy childhood, that most people don't know the risk factors and therefore don't know the preventative actions that they should be taking. And that for me is huge. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. And I really think that we all need to know this stuff. Self-help, you can, when you experience milder problems in that mental health continuum that I showed you earlier, being able to self-manage, being able to put some coping strategies in place, professional help, being able to recognize when you or someone else needs professional help and how to access the best quality service. What does good quality mental health service look like? What's the research on the treatment options? This stuff is important. We should all know this. And mental health first aid, which is about having the tools and the training to help other people when someone is far up the continuum and really, really needs help. These are the things that I believe we all should be working towards. And finally, in terms of solutions, I love the stuff that Pastor Gary talked about last night. For those of you who logged into the session last night, Young Leaders Lab, he talked about these 4 things. And really, this is what it's about. When it comes to solutions, we need to be able to curate. And I like the word curate because we don't create environments. Environments already exist with whatever people bring, whatever, baggage, in a good way and in a bad way, people bring to environments, to groups, to whatever. But your job, I believe, as a leader, as a youth leader, as someone who works with young people, is to know what you need to do to curate an environment where young people can flourish and grow. And this is about knowing how to help young people. What helps people flourish and grow, by the way? What helps people flourish? You need to know this. As someone working with young people, you need to know this. You need to know that one of the most important things that you can do to create a supportive environment is to help them identify their strengths, what energizes them, what makes them click, what natural talents they have. Help them to identify that and to hone those strengths and to nurture them and to build their self-esteem and to help them see the unique gift to the world that they are. Because I really believe that every single one of them is a gift to the world. And the best thing you can do in curating environments that are supportive is to be able to create that atmosphere where everyone is playing to their strengths. That young person knows what they're really good at, what they're, what they will bring to the world that is unique and amazing. Real social connection, and I'll just say a couple of things about that in a minute and then we close. Gary talked about guidance and mentoring, the importance of having role models to look up to, the importance of creating opportunities for young people. And I would just finish on this one, the effects of social support, which is that third bullet point, or second bullet point, sorry, the real social connection. Social connection is massively important for young people in particular right now. And I think the 2 effects that we need to understand, preventive effect, what do I mean by that? And I'll just explain this and then I'll stop for questions. Preventive effect of social support. What I mean by that is that research shows that social support actually dampens the emotional effects of trauma. And what I mean by that is we know that the impact of traumatic experiences that people go through and are going through right now, the impact of traumatic experiences is lessened by, or dampened by, reduced by good social support. So being plugged into feeling socially connected, feeling connected to, having good friends, or maybe it's the mentor or the youth leader or that real support actually helps people and prevents trauma to develop. And it also has a recovery effect. We know that if you're higher up that continuum of mental health, closer to mental illness, we know that people with good social support have higher chances of recovery from mental illness as well. So when someone is already really struggling, we know that being socially connected and having good support from friends helps people recover massively. So what can you do to be that social support for young people right now? You can listen and really listen without judgment. You could accept. So listening to accept people, not listen to fix, not listen to preach at them, not listen to, try to convince them that it's going to be okay. Actually, I love the model that David left us in the Bible. If you read through the Psalms, you see that the Psalms are a beautiful account of how David dealt with his own mental health problems and his own fluctuation and moves across the continuum of human emotion and thoughts. I was just reading this morning, actually, Psalm 31. Psalm 31, the title of Psalm 31 is a psalm of complaint and praise. I mean, that's awesome, right? A psalm of complaint and praise. I love that model of, telling yourself what to do, even, not ignoring the pain, not ignoring. I mean, there's another Psalm 55, super deep, where he talks about the deep experience of betrayal and feeling that, he's been betrayed by people that he really trusted. And now he's in the presence of enemies because of the betrayal, So he complains, he acknowledges the pain, but then in the same Psalms, he then praises God and he tells himself what to do. I love Psalm 31, where he says, "Oh Lord, I place my trust in you. I have taken refuge." So it's kind of like in the same Psalm, he then complains about, feelings of shame and this and that. But at the same time, he tells himself what to do. I'm going to trust God through this, and I'm going to keep trusting God. I'm going to remind myself that I have put my trust in God. And this is such a great model of accepting your difficult situations and accepting your emotions, even the deepest, darkest one, and then at the same time praising God through them and not waiting until you feel better either. Because David didn't wait until he felt better to write the psalm. He wrote it while he was feeling the pain. And that's the key thing. So again, skills for providing social support, listening, accepting, demonstrating empathy, being available for people, making space for people, and being there for them the day after and the day after and the day after for as long as they need you. Because it's not your responsibility to fix them, but your only responsibility, in fact, it isn't to fix anyone, because you can't fix people. You can't fix it. But all you can do is the most important thing that people really need, which is to just be present, be there, be available for people, listen to them. Don't wait until you have something awesome to say. Actually, it's not about that. It's just about listening to people and helping them see that there is hope and that God has a better future for them. Amazing. Hopefully that makes sense, and I'm really keen to take questions.
No, that's fantastic. You guys feel free to throw in your reactions, your clapping reactions in there, because that was absolutely
clapping. And
just while we're on this chat about when we're talking about how you started mentioning some scriptures towards the end and how like your faith comes into play with your mental health, we had a great question. It's like, how do we invite God more, or can you give some more practical advice around inviting God into your mental health journey? Do you have any experience in that? Have you seen any ways that that's being done?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we need to know is that there's to answer that question, I need to explain what we call in psychology the thought-feeling connection. What I mean by that is we know that when the way we think, the way we start thinking about things can either make our experience better or worse. For example, I was having a conversation earlier this morning, talking to a psychiatrist friend of mine, and he gave me this example, and it's so true. Like if you're on the street and I see Pete Cleveland, the other side of the road. Pete, I see you, you're crossing the road, you go to the other side instead of I feel that you saw me and you just cross the road, go to the other side of the road. And you keep going about your life. And I will perceive that there are different ways in which I could perceive that. For example, I could start thinking, well, actually, he didn't see me. Like, he's just, he might be in a rush or whatever. He's just going off about his life. Or I could start thinking, oh, hang on, he saw me and he chose to walk across the road. And what's going on? Like, am I not worth him, spending 2 minutes just to say hi and da 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 da? And the more I accept those thoughts into my head, the more I will experience feelings of, I'm not worth it. I'm not worth his time, or, people, no one likes me. No one cares about me. No, like, people can't even take 5 minutes out of their day to say hi, blah, 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 blah. So that's what I mean by the thought feeling connection. Your thoughts have a lot more to do with, Peter said, I'll say hi next time. Yes, please. No, your thoughts will have a lot more to do with how you feel than your actual experience. And this is why it's important to understand that. And then there are lots of other things like negative, what we call negative automatic thoughts, for example. Some of these thoughts come in almost automatically. And it can be very difficult to challenge these thought patterns, but you have to. And that's what I think, that's where I think the Word of God is so useful. This is where you can invite God into your own thought patterns. And what I would recommend usually to my clients is, first of all, keep a diary of those thoughts. When you have those difficult experiences and when you're really struggling with those negative thoughts, consider writing them down. Write down the thoughts. Just write them down. So keep a diary of those, and keep a diary of the feelings as well. So the thoughts that you had and the feelings that you experienced because of those thoughts and stuff. And the second thing that I would say is try to find someone that you trust to discuss those. Not all of them, but at least some of them. When they start getting really overwhelming, it's really useful to talk this stuff through with someone else. And the third thing is challenge the thinking, challenge those thought patterns. Think, how do you do that, Anna? You might be asking. Well, think about the contrary, the opposite of that thought. For example, if the thought was, I'm not worth Pete's time. Like, I'm just not worth it. I'm not worth it. I'm not enough to get his attention, whatever. Think of the opposite of that thought. And when you think of the contrary, ask the question, what does God say about this? And take the time to research that, meaning read the word, talk it through with someone, and really think about what God says about that. And that's how you invite God into this. Because if you don't break that cycle of negative thinking, it will spiral out of control. And that's where people then start feeling really overwhelmed. And actually, you can break the cycle. It can be difficult to do, but that's why I said, find someone that you trust that can help you do that. And for those of you who are youth leaders and stuff, like, make sure that you know this, make sure that your young people know that they can come to you to talk about this stuff, that it's normal to have these thoughts. We all have these thoughts, by the way. Every normal human being will have these negative automatic thoughts, but it's okay to talk about them. And when you do have a conversation, it's important that you ask, it's not your job to reframe those thoughts. The person needs to do it. It's not your job to do it for them. It's only your job to ask the questions that will help challenge that negative thinking pattern. That's all you need to do. Just ask the question. What does God say about that? And that's it.
Oh, I love that. And it kind of brings scriptures like Romans 12 into life when it's talking about renewing your mind. Daily
totally.
Pattern. Yeah,
it is. That's what the Apostle Paul was talking about, I believe. It's what we can do. And we have the design. The God's design is there to enable us to do that. This is how you renew your mind. And it's so useful to actually keep track of these thought patterns rather than just going in your feelings. And the other thing that I would say, sorry, Helder, to stop you, but the only other thing that I would say, just to conclude on this, is don't wait until you feel better. Don't. You have to do you do this process of breaking the thinking pattern, that cycle, and then you will feel better. But you can't wait until you feel better, because if you do, then you'll never do it.
No, I love that, Anna. We had a question here as well that came in earlier about the coping mechanisms. Right at the start, you started talking to us about coping mechanisms, and we hear a lot about negative coping mechanisms. And maybe you can shed a little bit of light into some practical examples of some positive coping mechanisms, if there are any, and also some practical advice on how to break those bad negative coping mechanisms and how to implement positive mechanisms.
I think coping strategies or coping mechanisms, coping with, stress or stressors, or, whatever they might be with COVID or the loss of someone or whatever, we all need to develop coping mechanisms and strategies. I think, a couple of really practical things I would say. First of all, be selective about what and who you listen to. Because what you listen to will feed your mind, and it's therefore very important to be selective. Now, this is so key, because in a world of social media and really loud voices and everything, everyone has something to say about everything. It's like, wow. The most important thing that you can be is selective. Choose wisely. Choose what you're listening to, who you're listening to, what voices you're letting in, because they will influence your own thoughts, your own mindset, your own emotions, your own feelings. So I would say be very selective. I always say this about even, staying informed. It's important to stay informed, but it's important that you stay on top of the information rather than, having everything thrown into you by, whatever. But it's important to be selective. The second thing is what I said already, which is to keep a diary of thoughts, negative thoughts and feelings. And in that diary to then be able to challenge those thought patterns. And I guess related to that, I mentioned the David method, which is the ability to tell yourself what to do. You can do that. You can tell yourself what to do without waiting until you feel better, but really tell yourself what to do, like David does all the time. Just read the Psalms. He does that all the time. He complains and then he praises God. He talks about how, this sucks, I feel horrible. And he really elaborates on how horrible he feels sometimes. Some of those Psalms are like uber dramatic. But then at the same time, he tells himself what to do. I will trust in you, God. You are my strength. You are my refuge. So remind yourself constantly of who God says you are. That's the best coping mechanism, is to go to God. The other thing I would say is do things that relax you, especially if the coping is about, for example, you need coping strategies to deal with anxiety, for example. When anxiety starts taking over and you become too anxious that it's almost preventing you from functioning normally, there are things that you can do to help you relax. Sometimes relaxing your body will in turn relax your brain, for example. So it's important to do breathing exercises or stretches or whatever. Things that will relax your body tend to help the brain relax as well. So sometimes you start with your body, not with your mind. And sometimes it's the other way around. It's thinking about things that relax you. For me, seeing pictures of my children, one of them is on this call, sorry, cringe, but seeing pictures before COVID, when I was still traveling a lot, and I was traveling a lot for work, and places like China and, literally the other side of the world, and at the same time having to perform and having to do things that are putting me on a position of, wow, I really have to deliver. So lots of stressors around me. I know that there are things that will automatically help me relax, like seeing pictures of my kids, seeing pictures of my dog, because I love dogs. And even, laughing is another thing. So you need to know what are the things that help you relax, and you need to give yourself grace in moments when you're in difficult times, when you're going through a difficult season, you need to be putting those things in a bit more, because they are the things that give you energy. And the other thing is, talk to someone. Always, always, throughout every single one of these steps, have someone there for you. Having someone in your corner is the most important thing. 100%. So hopefully this is practical enough.
That's fantastic. We're going to go through a few more questions. We're getting quite a few questions on, like this current digital age. And, you mentioned some stats earlier on just how many people actually suffer from, poor mental health. And I think in this current climate, a lot of young people find themselves helping their friends or counseling their friends. And, even in really hard situations, suicidal situations, they end up talking their friends out of it, or being emotionally invested into a situation like that. Can you give some tips, some pointers, or some thoughts around setting some boundaries, and maybe some advice on young people, when they should draw the line, how much help is too much help, and what is the right help that young people can really apply when
Great question. I think a couple of things that we need to talk about there. First of all, the importance of signposting situations. And this is why mental health literacy is so key. Because when you develop mental health literacy, when you develop your own knowledge of mental health, and again, another plug for the mental health course that we are developing, which will be available hopefully in the new year. And it will be great to help you with that. But there are other things out there that can help you. There are some amazing websites like the Mind website, even the Mental Health Foundation, and even the World Health Organization website also has some useful information on mental health. So there are different ways in which you can develop your own mental health literacy so that you are able to signpost things appropriately when needed. So when we talk about things like people struggling with suicidal thoughts, for example, it's absolutely essential that you feel that you know when and how to signpost that. I would say that every time someone talks about suicide, you have to signpost it, regardless of whatever feeling you might have, whether the person just said something about, wanting to give up, not wanting to live anymore, or whatever. Actually, you can never dismiss that. Never. You have to talk to someone about it. You have to explain to the person that actually we're going to have to make sure that you're safe. And for that reason, I'd like for us to, let's talk to someone about it. And trust me, when someone takes the courage to verbalize that they are considering not being around anymore, that means that they want you to step in and do something. They want help. Otherwise, they wouldn't talk about it. So it's very important to know how to signpost to, talking to a pastor straight away, to a youth leader, to someone that can step in and help and make sure that that individual is in a safe environment, that they're, you then need to do a risk assessment, obviously, that is too complex for me to explain now in 2 minutes. But the key idea is make sure that you develop your own levels of understanding so that you know when and how to signpost and to make sure that people are safe. In terms of boundaries, I would say a couple of things. First of all, it's important to be consistent. The most important thing that you can be when someone is fluctuating in that mental health continuum, the most important thing that you can be for them is for you to be steady, consistent. And by consistent, that means, just work a plan that is feasible for you of checking in with that individual, depending on, the level of seriousness of their condition, obviously. But make a plan and be consistent. So if you say, do you know what, I'm going to check in with this person every day, do it every day, ideally at the same time. That is a lifeline, because actually the method is as important as the content of you checking in. It's not even about what you do to check in. It's about having that one consistent check-in point for that person, knowing that, Folu is going to be checking in on me tomorrow again at 10 a.m. like that, and doing that consistently. I'm not suggesting you should do it every day. I'm saying you need to know depending on how serious the condition is or the situation is. But maybe it's every couple of days you're going to check in with that person. Do it consistently. And be consistent in your approach as well. Know that you don't need to fix them. Know that sometimes when people are struggling in the mental health continuum, they can develop very easily, they can develop over-attachment to the person that is helping them. And you do need to set boundaries. You do need to make sure that you, first of all, know that you are not the savior. You're not the savior. You're not the savior. I will say it again. You are not the savior. Okay? So you need to remind yourself of that. And sometimes you need to remind the person of that as well, that you can't fix their problem. You're not there to do that either, but you are there to consistently help them challenge the thinking that perhaps needs to be challenged, or, you know, just check in and remind them of who they are, who God says they are, that sort of thing. But putting boundaries is absolutely key. Otherwise, a situation like this can very easily take over if you don't set some boundaries. So making sure that you eliminate all the risk, well, not eliminate, but that you assess the risk factors in terms of, you know, if it's suicidal thoughts, for example, what's the level of those thoughts? Have they, you know, do they have a plan as well as thinking about it, blah, blah, blah. Have they tried it before? You know, doing a proper risk assessment on one hand. If it's something else, not necessarily that, but if it's, you know, anxiety or whatever, then working out a plan that is feasible to support them consistently and then sticking to it. And that's it.
I love that, Anna. I love this session. Thank you so much. So many questions coming through. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. But I just love some of the gold that you were sharing with us today. You know, like, be consistent in your approach. Like, I love that so much. Whatever your approach is it a call a week, a text a week, whatever it is, be consistent in that and do that in the long run. You know, you're not the savior. Remember that. It's not our job to fix people. We're signposting people to the right trusted sources. And I just love some of the points as well that you shared on just keeping a healthy mental health, like being selective on what and who you listen to, stay informed, but stay on top of the information. Like, that's absolute gold. Journal, do things that relax you. Anna, go on.
No, yeah, I just wanted to add one more thing, sorry, that I forgot to say, but I think is important really quickly. Remember that we are in a very positively biased context. As a church, we have a bias towards the positive, and that can sometimes make it very difficult for people to open up, especially when it comes to mental health, especially when it comes to thoughts that they feel embarrassed about or ashamed of. And I just read a comment on that. So please remember to always open up a space, a safe space where people know that it's okay, that we are human, that we go, that the fullness of the human experience includes discomfort, pain, sorrow, loss. It's not always joy and happiness and laughter, but actually the fullness of human experience of going through pain and praising God despite, and going through loss and seeing God in the midst of that. That's what really helps us grow and flourish as humans. So I think the most important thing that we can do for each other is remind ourselves that it's okay to feel all those things, all those difficult emotions. It's okay. They are part of this human experience, but knowing that there's a deeper sense of joy that comes from within, from knowing that God is with us all the way through it. God is with us. And that's the main thing.
That's so good. That's so good. And guys, you know, Anna's also on Instagram, and she's got a YouTube channel as well. And there's some great resources out there. You know, she's made some great videos as well. So, like, be sure to look her up and keep up with everything that she's doing. And of course, watch this space for the mental health literacy course that's coming out. You know, our church is going to be rolling that out. I seriously encourage you to just watch this space and keep inquiring, keep asking in our YouTube, on our Instagram page and in the chats. Would love to help you, you know, in your journey with mental health, wherever you find yourself in, whether you're supporting young people, whether you're a teacher or you're a young person yourself. We thank you so much. Thanks for joining us, and thanks, Anna, for your time and for an incredible session. And we look forward to seeing you guys at 5 p.m. for our live session of this evening. God bless, guys. Take care.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Good job, Helder. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.